everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Neuro-Inclusive Dog Pod, the podcast where we bridge the gap between neurodiversity and the dog world. So before we get into today's episode, I am just going to put a little trigger warning on here because we may be talking about topics surrounding death and domestic abuse. So if it's not safe for you to listen at the moment, then I would advise switching off and perhaps going and finding an earlier episode of the podcast. So without further ado, I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves. So welcome, Andy, to the podcast. Can you introduce our listeners to yourself and tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So first of all, we're going to try and hit as much humour as possible as we can in this event, because there are some serious subjects. You're absolutely right. There's some really funny stuff as well. And being the British people that we are, we're quite good at dark humour. So maybe we'll touch on some of that as well. I'd like people to enjoy this podcast as much as possible. So my work background is I've taught martial arts for decades, long time, and that was my principal my principal job, and that's what I still do. And but I became an author in 2013. This is my sixth book that I've just written, and I've published books for the best part of 10 years as well. We've helped over 75 authors publish over 100 books. So my job career is martial arts, author, and publisher. Try and get that in your passport.
Exactly. So your book that we're going to chat about today on the podcast is titled Dog Walking for Beginners. So can you tell me a little bit more about the book and what circumstances led you to writing that particular book?
Absolutely. Right. Let's show you what the cover's about, shall we? There's the cover. There's the cover. But my cover design, because cover designers, I don't know if you know this, but designers are like drummers in a band.
Right.
So when you have a business, you have this sort of business, a publishing business, you have like the author itself, you have the marketers, you have editors, but publishers, get it right. Designers work differently. Look what he did with this. Don't you think that's clever? Puts the tail down. That's the front and the back. I think that's really clever. And I thought, well, good man. This is my cover designer, James. So, Dog Walking for Beginners is. My wife was the dog owner. She's always owned dogs. She's owned animals all her life. Her mum told me about stories when she was a little girl. She used to have a horse, and one day she turned around, and the horse was in the kitchen. They had sheep. They walked her in the house. She was mad on animals. She'd always had dogs, had all sorts of dogs, and this dog was rescued from Romania. He was 5 months old when she got him. You can see what. Yeah. How could you resist that little face? Look.
Amazing.
He was super cute. And rescued from Romania. And Romania has a terrible record with animals. I've just seen what they've done. Was it in Holland or Denmark, where every dog is going to have a phone? It's just an incredible thing. They're a long way away from that in Romania. And so Sabat came over. Now his name's Sabat. Sabat. Every time you do something, CapCut calls him Sabbath, and you have to remember it's Black Sabbath and it's Ozzy Osbourne. And I don't know where she got the name from, because she told me a couple of reasons. She fibbed about both of them. I don't actually know where she got the name from. It's unique. I've never heard of a Sabbath.
No.
It's a lovely, lovely, cute dog. And when we got together as a couple, the dog came along, absolutely, as it should be. And I had wanted a dog for a while, and I got this cross. He's a Solly. Now, whether that's an official brand or unofficial, I don't know. But he's a cross between a collie and a shepherd.
Yeah,
lovely natured, as most Romanian rescues are, in my experience as well. They have a slightly smaller head than they do of their body. Their head never grows that much. They all seem to do that, and they have these nice tails. But I don't know if your listeners will remember it's Tobo. That is Sabat. He just looks like the dog, and then looks like a little wandering coyote wandering around. And he came to me through the marriage. That's how he came to me. So now I'd known Kirsty since 2001. That's when I first met her. She was one of my martial arts students. She trained with me for about a year or so, and then we lost contact. She left. She had an injury and she left, and I didn't hear from her for 17 years. So she was one of those people, if you're ever part of a martial arts group, or a dance group, or a yoga group, there are characters within your group. And if they disappear, you just go, oh, I wonder what happened to this person. I used to think about Kirsty, and I couldn't remember her surname either. And then around about 2017, Facebook, I got this friend request from someone called Crystal Clear. So I thought immediately, Russian wife, not interested in that. That's it, completely false name. And then she messaged me again, and I ignored it again. And I later found out she did the same thing with her sister, and her sister ignored her for a year, let alone three times. And she said, it's Kirsty Ivans. And I was like, oh, blimey, I remember you. Wonder what happened to you. And we started talking on Facebook. And then subsequently, I found out not long before COVID that she'd been through quite a rough time with domestic abuse, and she'd been beaten up quite a lot and had a really bad time, and ended up a broken arm, which developed into a thing called complex relational pain syndrome, and she had some medical issues. But she was a fairly robust 40-year-old woman by the time I saw her again. We saw each other in the summer of 2020. Our relationship developed very, very quickly, and then we ended up getting married like quite quickly afterwards. I was 58 at the time, and I thought I'm going to need a carer at some point. Wouldn't it be nice to get married? And she said, yes, it would. So we got married at Gretna Green. We had a lovely wedding. I frequently say it's the best day of my life, and my son gets the hump when I tell that. It was just he was the best man that day, so that was okay. It's just a lovely, lovely day, and things. First year of marriage is often you're still getting used to each other, really, and so we had some issues as you do, but we had a wonderful time and did lots of things, and she struggled a bit with the medical issues sometimes, and then one day I came home from work, 22nd of March 2022, sorry, and she'd passed away in her sleep. So at the age of 41, it wasn't what I expected at all. She had passed away, and but the dog was still there, and there were choices at the time. I could have kept him, or she could have gone back to her parents, gone with her parents. He knew her parents very well. They've got a great house, a lovely garden, and but it was never an issue for me. It was just like I felt that was my role, that he had come into my life, and he deserved a lot, really, because he was a rescue in the first place.
Yeah.
He'd had this woman that he absolutely adored, and they were, joined at the hip.
Yeah.
And he got me as a consolation prize. I felt sorry for him, really, to be honest. And then I took over the ownership. It's called Dog Walk for Beginners because I'd never owned a dog before. Kirsty was an expert with animals. She could have been there with Johnny Wallace and David Attenborough, understanding what's going on. I was just a local idiot who was given a lead and then said, walk a dog. I didn't know what. So that's how it came about. And the book is about the stories of that development, talks about our relationship, talks about our time together. But then it goes into how he helped me get through the trauma of all of that, and lots of the funny stuff that they do. There's a thing in neuro-linguistic programming, which I was trained in, pattern interrupts, and dogs are brilliant at pattern interrupts. So if you're having a bad time, if you've had a day that's not the best, they will make you laugh. They will do stuff. They do because they don't seem to follow logic.
Yeah.
You're walking along quite happily, and all of a sudden you're nearly falling over because he's pulled you and gone back the other way because he sniffed something, and it was, to him, it was fascinating. I am fascinated by dog walking, how they sniff around.
Yeah.
What do they know?
Yeah.
What's going on here? Because Sabat had a friend, a little beagle called Dexter, and Dexter loved to eat dog poo. Disgusting. Just like he once had one that was so fresh, it was just like, oh my God, what's this dog doing? His own was horrified. And then I read afterwards that they don't see waste like we see it because they can smell all the flavours still in there. And I didn't know this. So Sabat had tuna the night before, and Dexter thought, well, I like tuna. Well, that's some of that.
I know, it's madness.
So it's totally gross to us, but quite funny to when you're out on a dog walk.
Amazing. So it's fair to say that out of kind of very, very, very sad, unexpected circumstances, you still had a link to Kirsty, didn't you, in lots of ways. So when it comes to losing somebody unexpectedly and inheriting a pet that they probably didn't realize they would inherit in that way, what kind of advice could you give somebody in that situation?
Um, it's a really corny answer, but loves the answer to everything, to be honest.
Yeah.
Sabat and I had developed a level of relationship. I really loved him as a dog anyway. I think he was
Yeah.
such a character. And what had developed over our time together was that Kirsty would walk him and I would run him. So I did some research about how far can a dog of his sort of size, a collie shepherd, what can they run? Now, obviously, collies are very fit dogs. So I just did some research online. It said 12 to 15 miles, they'll be all right. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's bloody impressive, that is. And one particular run we did 9 miles once, and he was tired when we got back. We did another, we did 12. I was exhausted. He came in and had zoomies around the house, just like, honestly, taking the pee, to be honest. It's just like, you big idiot, look at this. So I ran him and she walked him. And when everything was down to me, I immediately realised the next day after she passed, the first walk I took him on really was because the book was nearly called Walk Your Dogs Together. Because when I was walking him on my own, then you start to see couples walking their dogs, and you realise that walking a dog with a significant other person gives you the opportunity to talk about stuff you don't talk about normally. So if you're in the house, you're restricted by the four walls and the issues within the house. So whether you've got children, or whether you've got a business together, or whether you both hate your job, or you're not getting on very well, whatever. Outside, it seems that you can talk about other things. There's a freedom about being outside.
Yeah.
Whether you're in, if you're close to fields and you can walk freely and let the dog off lead, that's a different experience. Or
Mm-hmm.
they're on lead and you're walking around a dog walking field,
Yeah.
or you meet other dogs. Um, I just found there's a freedom to speak, and I found that many times with other people.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the times when we did walk the dogs together, that it opened up the avenues and possibilities of conversation in a completely different way than it does in the house, or even when you go for dinner. Um, does that make sense? That you're
Yeah.
enclosed when you're talking. If you go for a nice
Yeah.
meal, you
Yeah.
still you sort of keep your voice down, don't you? Because you don't want everybody else to hear you. Because we're all
Yeah.
nosy, we listen to other people's conversations. But when you're outside,
Yeah.
you can almost be as loud as you like. Not that you are, but you could be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's like a freedom and a weight, and there's that fresh air, and there's all the um, serotonin and dopamine that's been released as you talk. You can get
Yeah.
through a lot of good stuff, and so uh, that's so. To answer your question about what I would advise is give love.
Yeah.
If you feel that you're not making enough progress, give more,
Okay. Yeah.
because we know from being dog owners that they don't expect anything,
Yeah.
and sometimes they don't get much either from some owners either, do they? And so
No.
when that love is given to you, especially when you are now bereft of the person that you were with, I found it incredibly helpful. There was a time period because obviously he was her dog, so she
Yeah.
used to wake up in the morning, come downstairs, he'd be lying on the sofa, and she'd be a bit loony with him. Sabat, Sabat, and he'd go, yeah, like this. Ah, it was like Kermit the Frog, like that. She'd rub his belly, and he'd go, I used to come downstairs. I go, all right, boy, and he'd go, you're all right. And he's like, God, I've got the second prize. God. And sometimes he'd lie on his back and he'd offer his belly for a rub. But that's not me. I'm a calmer person than Kirsty ever was. And about 3 months in, there was a storm one night. And it was really heavy rain. I woke up to like this black nose in front of me, but you could hear the rain hitting the windows, and it was
Mm.
thundery. And he was scared, and he's not a sort of scared. I mean, fireworks hardly bother him at all now.
Yeah.
So I said, well, come on the bed then, boy. Come on, be with me. So I gave him a little stroke, gave him a little cuddle, and just felt up. It's the first time I felt like I'd done something right for him. I knew I
Oh.
was doing, getting the routines right. I don't. You must know. Dogs Behaving Really Very Badly, that TV show.
Yeah.
I know Graham, and I messaged him on LinkedIn and asked for some advice. And the advice that he gave me was about routines. It was the things I was doing already, but it was really reassuring to hear from, whatever you think of Graham, that someone who knew more about dogs than I did. I was getting some good advice. So that was quite helpful. And so I knew I was doing that all right. But that night when I gave him love and gave him reassurance and calmed him down and told him everything was all right. If I wasn't bothered, he didn't seem that bothered either. I was okay. I don't understand it, but he's all right. That was the night when our relationship started to change, I think.
Amazing. So when it comes to your relationship with him, how would you say that he helped you navigate that grief, and how did your relationship evolve over time? Because it's an incredibly tough thing to find yourself, in, isn't it? You've, like you say, he was Kirsty's dog, and then all of a sudden he's now your dog, and you're also coping with a huge amount of grief as well. So did you find that having him around helped with that grieving process?
100%. He was the main reason I got through it all.
Amazing.
Mostly because he just did different stuff.
Yeah.
He didn't know he was funny. He's like the person who should be on stage and doesn't realise that he's funnier than John Bishop. It's just like, all of a sudden you're with the funniest comedian you've ever been with, who does weird stuff, and I don't understand why he's doing it. So all the pattern interrupts would be great. Go out and do stuff. Not understand, because I've explained that talking to a dog is like, I speak German, he speaks Chinese, and we've got a bloke who only speaks English trying to translate for us. But in the meantime, I'm trying to work out. Remember, he's Romanian in the first place, so he was brought up only understanding Romanian. And luckily, Kirsty had done a lot of great things for me in terms of training him to be okay. Never have a problem with toilet indoors, always outside. He's a brilliant dog like that. Very, very house trained. He has done some weird stuff in the past, but he is very house trained. He was prepared. If he was a puppy, I think maybe that would have been different for me, but he was prepared. I read that if a dog sees that someone that they know has actually died, they can understand that. If the owner just disappears or they're dumped, that confuses the dog massively and causes all sorts of trauma. He was at home the day she died.
Right.
He was with her for about 6 hours before I came home. So he knew, he must have visited her during the time, nudged her, no life signs or whatever, and he would have understood that.
Yeah.
And he then manifested that. He would come and see me in the night sometimes just to make sure I was breathing. And he still sort of does it sometimes, but I think it's mainly because he wants me to know that he might want some food. But that happened. He didn't play with his toys for a year, didn't touch them. That his sadness was deep in that way. But then we established routines, such as if I went anywhere and had to go, first thing that happened was I used to have an office, and I stopped going to the office.
Right.
Completely. Started to work completely from home, and that's been fine. Luckily, with the publishing side, it's all digital anyway, so we can do everything online. And that's good. So that was the first thing. I was at home with him all the time. So he wasn't left on his own for hours and hours and hours. The next thing that happened was he would still go and visit Kirsty's parents. That's his second home. So we don't have dog sitters. He goes to Kirsty's parents. I also have a friend called Simon who has a collie called Ash, and he'll go there sometimes. So he has places when he goes anywhere, everything in that part of his life is normal.
Yeah.
And this is nearly 4 years now that we've been with that. So he's quite happy being around, and every now and then he'll come and sit in the bed behind me, but mostly he's at the moment because it's a bit cold, so he can't go in the conservatory where his favourite sofa is. But other we've got this house is was it the sport dog lives in this house.
That's
and I don't mind. He is spoiled, but he's perfect, so what else can I do?
Exactly. And I think that's it. I think the comfort that we get from our dogs is massively, and obviously a lot of my listeners are neurodivergent people, and I think we naturally have that empathy towards dogs anyway, and they're a massive support system in our lives. And so it's so lovely to hear how he's been that support system to you in such terrible circumstances, really. So I know one of the things we discussed in our pre-podcast chat was how you wanted to express the importance of pre-planning for things when it comes to lots of different things, not just funerals, but in life in general, and for life with your dog. What would you advise to any of our listeners that haven't actually thought about those kind of things, and how you find it if you don't pre-plan things, how that kind of affects you, that kind of, have you got any advice on those kind of things?
Yeah, I this is all through experience. My son last year, I think, was diagnosed with ADHD, and he talked about all the things that issues that he had. And I said, you know what? I'm sure I'm not quite. I'm going to say it right. I'm not quite right. There's too many things go on in my head. And I said, I don't think I've got ADHD, but I would say I've got ADD. That's the way that I think. I used to say that my mind is like that scene in Minority Report where you can move everything around. That's the way my brain works. Now, one of the things that happened when Kirsty died was my energy. I was like an old Samsung phone. It would just drop out really quickly. So I'd get up at 5:30, go to the gym, walk Sabat, have breakfast, and go for a sleep. That would just completely exhaust me.
Yeah.
So the grief was sapping my energy all the time.
Yeah.
And it was almost like sleep apnea, and sometimes I would think, well, do I have to do this for work or whatever? And that massively affected the business, not putting all the energy that you need to put in it.
Yeah.
And so then I found out that people just don't talk about certain things. I mean, we talked earlier about the trigger warning.
Yeah.
People don't want to talk about death.
Yeah.
It's like, it's almost like he invites it. Well, he doesn't invite it. It's either happening or it's not.
Yeah.
And then I read something. Have you watched Yellowstone?
No, I haven't. No.
I loved Yellowstone.
Right.
I really, really loved 1883, which is a prequel to Yellowstone. And there was a Lakota Sioux actor. And because I love everything, and because my brain works like I've got to know everything, I bought this scene on Yellowstone. And in there was an interview with this guy, and he talked about death because there's some of the characters die in the show. And he said, in the Lakota Sioux language, there is no word for death. Well, what is it then? what do you call it?
Yeah.
And he said, well, we just see the spirit pass from one plane to another. And I found that tremendously useful. Yeah. I thought, if that's our belief, as opposed to a Christian belief, how does that affect how I think about it? And it just made me question my philosophy on life.
Yeah.
Really interesting. And then things would happen. Talk about signs, robins, white feathers, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So much of that was happening to me. And I had it recently when my mum passed as well. So I am agnostic about whether there is something else. I think there's three types of people. There's people who go, nonsense, that doesn't exist. Yeah. Other people go, have you heard of angel numbers? And other people who go, I'll just accept it. I'll just accept it. I don't know. Until I've gone through that process, can't come back and tell you.
That's exactly it.
I will just accept it. And every now and then, Sabat would look around. And I think, what's he looking at? Stop doing that, Sabat. What are you looking at? I can't see what you're looking at. And I don't know what he could see. But anyway. So pre-planning, funerals should definitely be pre-planned. If you're in a relationship and you might consider yourself young, in your 30s, 40s, whatever, plan your funeral. Because if you get, I didn't know you did this. They have brochures for coffins. Sounds awful, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's quite funny if you're doing it with your partner. It's not funny at all when you're picking it for your partner. It's hot. So, and then the other thing is about cost. A funeral is anywhere between £2,500 to £5,000. If you start paying for it 40 years before it happens, it's peanuts. If you have to find £5,000 today, it's really hard.
Yeah. So
I would have always ignored someone like me saying that, but I just think it's a good thing to do. It stops. I don't want my son to go through what I went through when I passed.
Yeah.
Just plan it, just do it, and then that works for other things as well, doesn't it? It's like when they say, what advice would you have given yourself when you were 18 years old? And
Yeah.
mine would be save your bloody money,
Yeah.
because um, building up a nice fund, you never know when you'll need it. Whereas
Yeah.
looking for money is hard work. It's just
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people also, what's that great car sticker? Jesus saves. He couldn't on my salary, but it's you don't have to save much, and it builds really quickly.
Yeah.
So, pre-planning,
Yeah.
health. I'm 62 years old, and I'm in really, really good health, and
Yeah.
that's another way of saving things. My,
Yeah.
my dad died when he was 59. My granddad died when he was 61. I've outlived them. I'm going to outlive everybody in my family, I think. My
Wow.
vital signs are all good. And that's all done through an obsession with physical fitness and mental fitness and all those sorts of things that drive me
Yeah.
on and take me out into the weather. So that's another way of pre-planning. And it just stops because when Kirsty passed, I didn't know where his insurance was. I didn't know what he ate. I,
Yeah.
I was ever so lucky because she used to walk with about 10 or other 10 dog owners, and they bought me £100 voucher for pets at home. I mean, it was like the kindest thing anybody did for me at the time. And then I didn't
Yeah.
have to worry about his food for 3 months. And in
Amazing.
that time, I worked out what he ate because I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So yeah, pre-planning is great, and sometimes you think it's difficult, but it's way harder when it's dropped on you.
Yeah, exactly. Great advice. So I know one of the things you do, and you mentioned it earlier in the podcast, is about using humor as a way to discuss difficult topics, just like, discussing difficult things. And why do you think it is that humor is such a powerful tool when you are, like when somebody is healing or going through difficult times?
It's in Afterlife.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
160 million people have watched that show.
Wow.
It's the most popular comedy show ever, and yet that subject is not funny at all. But Ricky Gervais has come out with a formula because people like to feel that even in the darkest times, and this would be true. Like, I was really lucky. About 20 years ago, one of my fascinations was the Holocaust, and so
Right.
there's a place near Nottingham called the Holocaust Centre,
Hmm.
and I went there a few times. Well, I went there many times actually, and I met survivors of the Holocaust, and even they found humour. If you can find humour, and these were survivors of Auschwitz,
Yeah.
if you can find humour in that, anything else is funny.
Yeah.
And so it's that number one, it's that little bit of serotonin that hits you. You can
Yeah.
even hear a joke a few times, can't you? The dopamine effect still works.
Yeah.
It's like you can't really have a greatest hits of comedy like you can have. I went to the ABBA Voyage, and they're not even real, and that's still brilliant. That show. Um,
Yeah.
you can hear music all the time, but if you keep doing the same joke, it's not funny anymore.
Yeah.
You're always looking for one of Jimmy Carr who can come up with one liner straight away.
Yeah.
And I mean Jimmy Carr, I was lucky to meet him a few years ago. He's a dark comedian. He talks about some proper
Yeah.
getting close to the bone stuff, and yet it's funny
Yeah.
because as a release, when we don't know what to do, we do one or two things: we either laugh or we cry.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine who laughs inappropriately at the wrong things. She's a nightmare,
Yeah.
but that's her release because if she didn't, she'd cry. And there was a thing yesterday on the radio about crying and why we actually cry. It's just fascinating about where it comes from, how we manufacture tears. It comes from blood originally. Do you know that?
I didn't know that. No. No.
Like, how does that work? And
Yeah.
it's part of the process of blood. So, like in Casino Royale, where he dabs his eye and he's got that tear
Yeah.
duct where he bleeds from the eye. That's why it happens. And so you just hear random things on Radio 4. That's what happens when you're driving in the fog. And so humour allows a release. And it doesn't matter how dark the subject is, you can talk about things that are really close to the bone. And
Yeah.
the darker you go in your life, the funnier the humour is, I think, sometimes as well.
Right. Yeah.
Because you can have quite juvenile humour, dad jokes, for example, those sorts of
Yeah.
things. Jokes with, children jokes, all those sorts of things. They're all funny things, aren't they? But yeah, I just find it's a release. Um,
Yeah.
and I think when you try to retrospectively view humour as well, that's a big mistake.
Right. Yeah.
If you go onto the Sky channels and go a long way down the list, you'll find a thing called, I think it's called That's TV and Rewind TV. And they're showing things like Rising Damp and Kenny Everett Christmas shows and all those sorts of things. And they always have warnings on them as well.
Yeah.
Because these things are not considered the right things to say these days.
Yeah.
That was the time we lived in. Some of those.
Yeah.
So I found, and even when I've told the talks from the book as well, I do give people warnings, but I find the strangest things funny sometimes. It's just a release.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And I think as well, I think it kind of takes away that kind of tension and not knowing. So if you're adding humour into it, so I think if you go through a terrible situation or something that's a bit taboo to speak about, I think if the person who is telling the story or telling the experience starts to add humour, it kind of like lightens it so the other people don't feel as awkward. Because I think sometimes, like you say, these things that we kind of avoid, and death is one of them, isn't it? And it's like we don't know what to say in those situations, so it kind of instantly lightens things and makes things a little bit easier, doesn't it, as well sometimes?
One of the things I've got in the book, there's a chapter on what to say.
Right.
So people will say, well, I never know what to say. And 15 minutes later, they're still talking to you, but they didn't know what to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stay strong is like the worst thing you can say to anybody. Just stay strong. I don't even know what that means. I go to the gym to stay strong.
Exactly.
I know what they think they mean, but it doesn't help at all.
Yeah.
And I know lots of people who've been bereaved and they go, that just winds me up. So then you go, well, what do I say? What do I say? And one person said to me that helped massively. She just said, are you making progress? I thought, yeah, every day I make progress actually, because it's away from the original event. I'm moving forward. We're building a bond. I'm now writing a book. That's all progress.
Yeah.
I think that's the kindest thing you can ask anybody. Are they making progress?
Amazing. So, on the subject of humour and going back to the book and your relationship with Sabat, can you share one experience of like a funny story from the book or something that represents your like unexpected joy of dog ownership?
Yeah, I can. I haven't expected joy is an interesting question. Right. So, Kirsty died the day before. I went to bed very, very late, found it very difficult to get to sleep, woke up, I don't know what time it was, 7 o'clock or something like that. There was a regular dog field that we used to walk around. And strangely, it's where a Roman villa was 2,000 years ago. So everybody knows where it is. And so I thought, well, I'll take him down there then. What are you supposed to do? So my routine the day before would get up at 5:30, go to the gym, go to the office for 7:30, work for an hour or so. My business partner would turn up, blah, blah, blah. That's the way it worked.
Yeah.
Now we're no rules. Don't know what the rules are. So work is just the last thing you think about. Take Sabat for a walk. He needs a walk. And Kirsty was a bugger for that. She wouldn't walk at regular times because if her arm hurt, then she wouldn't walk him.
Yeah.
But I thought let's establish a routine. So off we go. Thought we'll do an hour. And we go down to the dog field and we're wandering around. My mind's a mess. He's wandering, sniffing for rabbits and stuff like that. He's off lead and he's just wandering around. And then as we walk around the first thing, we meet a lady called Lucia and a dog called Rocky, Spaniel. And Spaniels are mental, right? Completely bonkers. And so is Rocky. So Rocky's mad, but he's a friend of Sabat. So Sabat's happy all of a sudden. I've got some routine in my life. So he's playing with Rocky. And now I'm talking to Lucia. And the first thing you have to say is that, Kirsty's passed away. It's, everybody's shocked. So young. Everybody's shocked. And as we're talking, she looks at me and she says, you just peed on your leg. I was like, what? So I look down and I've got my walking trousers on. So they're like that Gore-Tex stuff. So you don't even realise you're wet at first.
Yeah.
I look down and I just see him looking at me and peeing. I was like, what's that about? She said, he's claimed you. I thought, okay, right. So I'm talking to you and he's going, no, he's with me. He's with me. Right, Sabat, thanks a lot. So my first dog walk, thanks a bunch, mate. Then I realised how green I am at this because I've taken the poo bags out, that's all good, but I hadn't opened them up first. So they're a nightmare, aren't they?
They are.
And it's a bit windy. So then She says, "Oh, look, he's having a poo." Oh, all right, great. So I'll go over to him. He runs off. He's left his business. You sort that out, human. I am the royalty. Sort it. So I open my poo bag, and as I open it, I go for it, and the wind blows. And as I do this, the thumb goes straight in the brown stuff. So I've been peed on. I've got a thumb covered in poo now. So I wipe it on the grass best as I can. I thought I'm going to have to accept life is a bit different than it was yesterday, isn't it? So
Yeah.
that was my very first dog walk, peed and pooed on. Yeah, that's Sabat
Right.
setting out the rules straight away.
That's it. Oh, bless them. They have a good way of bringing you back down to earth with a kind of bang, don't they? They're like, yeah.
Literally, yeah,
Yeah.
literally. And there was all sorts of things I learned about. I mean, it does seem to me that as a dog owner, you speak a lot about peeing and pooing.
Yeah.
You look at the poo. You don't do this in your toilet, do you? You don't go and investigate and go, "Oh, I'm not sure about the colour of that," which maybe we should sometimes as well. I'm
Yeah.
just astonished at how much he can pee for a dog.
I know. Yeah.
It's astonishing. I have a friend of mine who she has one of these businesses that has artificial lawns, and you have to put a special stuff on there because of the acid in the dogweed, don't you? Or else
Yeah.
it sends your fake grass a funny colour. So
Yeah.
it's no wonder when he was a puppy and he came over from Romania. Uh, Kirsty's parents had this lovely garden, and they grew vegetables in it and all sorts.
Yeah.
And they were told that Sabat would grow no bigger than a spaniel. Well, he's the same size as a collie, so he just kept growing and growing and growing. And the dad
Yeah.
used, "When's that bloody dog going to stop growing?" She's like, "How do I know? I was told he's going to be the same size as a collie, as a spaniel." So he got to a certain size, but he would strip all the bark off the trees, pull her dad's vegetables up. There's a great picture of him eating the cucumber. He's never eaten a vegetable since, I think. He won't. He's almost carnivore. He won't eat vegetables. He just eats meat. And so that was the sort of thing that he did. The whole
Yeah.
garden thing fascinated him because he's a street dog.
Yeah. Amazing. So, what one of the most surprising lessons that you've learned about dog ownership that you never really expected?
Uh, I'm going to say vet bills. Now I'm really lucky because he's a. I don't know what's in these crossbreeds, but they don't seem to get ill at all. I've heard
Hmm.
some people say they get ill a lot, but he doesn't get ill at all. Nothing.
Hmm.
Um, when he was uh, I can't think of the right phrase, but when he was spayed, whatever they call it,
Yep.
when they were gone,
Yep.
Kirsty took him. He was only 7 months old. Took him to the vets. They said, "Now be careful with him because he's had this anaesthetic. He might be very drowsy for the rest of the day." She got him home. He ran around the garden. He didn't even know he had balls. He's like, "Oh, what's that? Oh, all right, God, no, no, don't know what to do." Didn't make any difference. He's just never been ill. I mean, he's due his jabs at the moment, so he's got to go and get them next week.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I was listening to the radio about 6 weeks ago, and they were saying about how much vet bills have risen in the last
Yeah.
18 months to 2 years since the
Yeah.
companies have started taking over rather than the independent vets.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting parallel between that and the funeral parlours, to be honest, because I spoke
Yeah.
to someone about funerals as well, and they said, if you're going to the co-op, which is what we did, um, you're much better going with independents because they're fairer in their pricing, you get better service. And it seems to me that's happening with the vets as well. Definitely happened with dentists. It's sort of
Yeah.
going that way with doctors as well. Um, so I think what happened, you said about the surprise. I haven't been I haven't been at the end of that surprise yet, but he's six
Yeah.
years old now, so I'm sure that will start to come. The insurance goes up without, I mean, just the fact he's getting older.
Yeah.
I think it would be much fairer if it was based on claims.
Yeah.
If you're a member of the AA, if you have 7 claims with the one car, they put your price up. If
Yeah.
you have no claims with your dog, they still
Yeah.
put your price up.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it seems, I forgot what I'm paying at the moment, but it seems like 60, 70 quid a month. Seems a
Yeah.
lot for a dog that's never ill.
Yes. Yeah.
So, there would be other things that surprise me as well. But
Mm.
that's the thing that shocked me. It's not.
Yeah.
And then I think then what happens is the poor animal gets to about 8 or 9 years old, and they're the ones that are getting dumped.
Yeah.
And all the shelters are full in the UK, as far as I know. It's
Yeah.
a real problem. The people who
Yeah.
run those places are just angels.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems that everybody who runs a shelter is stressed. You know, they have this immense love for the animals, and it's not just dogs, it's cats, it's hedgehogs, it's all sorts of animals.
Yeah.
And human beings can be not very nice creatures
Yeah.
in the animal world sometimes, as far as
Yeah.
animals are concerned.
Yeah.
It's like the boy meets girl, girl doesn't like dog, dog gets kicked out. She gets kicked out.
Yeah. Yeah.
This animal has given you its life, you
Yeah.
know, and I know love is fickle, and I understand, I'm a bit older than some people, and I've been around the block a bit, but I can't see why the dog should have to suffer in any way, shape, or form. If you're with someone and say, "Well, I'm not really a dog person," I go, "Well, I'm not really your person, am I?"
Yeah. Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
so those are the things I would say anyway.
Amazing. And I think that kind of ties in with the planning as well, doesn't it? I think, because when people get a dog, they don't necessarily realize these things, especially for first time dog owners, or if they've inherited a pet in that way that they wouldn't have had to deal with these things previously. I think it all kind of ties in, doesn't it? And it's nice that you mentioned about the positive reinforcement side of things and the patient side when it comes to your own relationship with Sabat. So what was the moment that you realized that that kind of patience, that kind of love, that mutual respect kind of thing was the way that the way forward, and the way that you were going to nurture your relationship with him, basically?
As I said earlier, I teach martial arts, and in
Mm.
that martial art, I teach children. Children are way, way more difficult to deal with than dogs,
Yeah.
and so you learn patience in dealing with children. Now,
Yeah.
children sometimes think they're right, which is always a problem, and so you have to tell them, as I say, this is not a democracy. I run this place. You either do
Yeah.
it or you go somewhere else. Can't do that with a dog.
Yeah.
This is democracy. Now he's an alpha dog, so he
Yeah.
thinks he's the boss. And in the early days, he was, because he understood her voice and not mine. Now it's not to
Yeah.
say he didn't understand my voice. He did, but he chose not to hear it. So this one
Yeah.
particular day, August 2022. So it's now 4 months after Kirsty passed. We're back in that
Mhm.
dog field where we first went, and we used to go in the morning. And he loves to chase rabbits. He did catch one once. That's another story. But anyway, he loved to chase rabbits, and in this field there were always lots of rabbits. And there's a couple I know, Brian and Rita, and we were talking. They've got a spaniel as well. And Sabat tanks across this field after this rabbit. So I call him, and he ignores me completely. Rabbit, ears closed, done, gone. Running after him, shouting his name, because I know at the other side of the field the fence is there. But the local builders decide they don't want to fix the fence because they say we have to leave the holes there for the deer. You ever seen deers go through a fence? They go over a fence, and they don't even blink to jump over it. So utter rubbish. The Sabat ran straight through the fence.
Mm.
Now on the other side of that fence is the A43. So is the A6 near you? Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's a busy road, right?
Yeah.
It's a long road as well. The A6 goes all the way across the country. A43 is another road. So it's a single file each way, but
Yeah.
60 miles an hour up and down this road. And that's
Yeah.
just literally 20 meters on the other side of this fence. And Dopey over here has gone through the fence, and I'm not catching him up. So I go through this lock gate, get through the gate, and as I get through onto the A43, this is 7:30 in the morning, peak rush hour. As I get
Mm.
through the gate, across the road, parked across the road, is a white Mercedes. It's pulled across the road. I've never seen this before at all, just pulled across the road. On the right hand side is a lorry with all of these cars backing up. And on the
Yeah.
left side of the road is another Mercedes with a very well dressed lady who had got out of the car and was going towards Sabat. Come here, boy, who's now in the road, wandering up and down, looking at everybody, going, "What's up with you lot then?" I have
Yeah.
no idea how lucky he was not to get run over and killed. Not a clue. Just the happiest dog. Couldn't see the rabbit. Where's my owner? And I then appear.
Yeah.
So I'm going towards him, jogging towards him, and all I can feel is his eyes on me.
Yeah.
There's only one word that's in everybody's head who stopped them. That word is knobhead.
Yeah.
All they're looking at me is, why is your dog on a lead? Why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? Anyway, he wasn't on a lead. Wasn't on a lead because he was on a field where he was safe, but he got through the fence. So all I wanted to do was pick him up and kick him. But I thought that doesn't help. How's that going to
Yeah.
help me? Because he doesn't know. I have to tell him. So I
Mm.
mean, when I did my book launch a few weeks ago, all the people who were involved in that story were at the book launch. Apart from the lady, I never knew what happened. The bloke in the white Mercedes, Simon, he was someone I knew. I didn't know at the time. He was at the book launch. Rita and Brian were there. They were at the book launch. It's the first time I ever told the story where everybody was in the room. They knew what their perspective was, and there he was, still smiling around. Give me a piece of steak, whatever you want. So I
Yeah.
took him back into the field that day, and Brian, who trained spaniels as gun dogs, he told me, he said, you can't shout at them because they then become fearful.
Yeah.
If you're going to tell them off, you have to do it immediately so they know it's now, or you don't say it at all. Because it's not like you can't reason with a child. You know, he did at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Dog goes, "What's 3 o'clock? I don't know what 3 o'clock is." So
Yeah.
it makes no sense. You have to positively reinforce it. That was the moment when I really understood that.
Amazing, amazing. So, when it comes to dog ownership in general, it can take a lot of time and energy, as you probably know. It's probably been thrust upon you. How do you manage that with you running your businesses and all the busy life that you lead? How do you manage your own energy and without that impacting your relationship with Sabat? I know you mentioned earlier that you've moved your office and you now work from home, which is
Yeah.
amazing. But is there anything else that you do to manage that?
Well, we talked about the neurodivergent part. I
Yeah.
realised this year actually. The amount of time I struggled with it was lack of sleep. So if I
Right.
wasn't sleeping well, I average between 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night. If I go below that, I'm absolutely terrible, and I really should be closer to seven.
Right.
I've never been an 8 hours a night person. That's not me. Um, but if I don't manage my sleep, I can't manage the energy to run my brain.
Yeah.
We talked about the minority report thing. If I'm
Hmm.
tired, my brain won't work.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing, getting the proper sleep. The other thing that's happened is I've completely changed my diet as a result of Sabat. I was vegetarian for 22 years. I now eat meat. Um, and I'm not mostly carnivore. We still eat vegetables and stuff. I eat, he doesn't. But that was an interesting process because I started to look at how healthy he was. And I thought, I'd been putting on weight for a while. And I thought, hmm, this is very lifestyle. And then I read Ultra Processed People by Chris Van Teliken, which
Hmm.
changed my life, that book. And it talked about the ultra processed foods, such as most vegetarian and vegan foods are. I know
Hmm.
there's lots of you can eat single ingredient foods, but mostly, I was in Tesco's once and I read this vegan pizza, and it wasn't a recipe; it was a prescription. It was just like 70 ingredients in a pizza. Should be like four, shouldn't there?
Yeah.
And so I thought, no, this is not good for me long term. So I had a tuna salad one night, and Sabat just looked at me like, "Why are you eating my food, you weirdo?"
Yeah.
Just like strange man. And then we decided we'd try fish and chips. So I cut off a third of the piece of cod, give it to him and his dinner, and I have the rest. I look around, and he's just looking at me like that. Come on in,
Yeah.
more, 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 because cod is a really meaty fish as well. So you're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I like that. I like that. So then I decided, well, let's give meat a go. And I haven't touched meat in 22 years at this point. So I tried a steak. Now, as soon as I tried the steak, Sabat just thought he'd gone to heaven. Oh,
Amazing.
good, he said. This is brilliant. We are finally trying to human to eat proper food. So that's it. I now go to a butcher's I went this morning in the local village. And so it's a good, I don't buy any meat from supermarkets. I just think it's terrible. Whereas
Yeah.
meat from your local butcher, properly sourced, um, mostly, as far as we know, the animal is looked after as well as it can be. And I think things like Clarkson's Farm have made a difference to that as well.
Yeah.
When you see, he has dogs and he really cares for his animals. And he says, why would you think that farmers don't care for their animals? It's such a
Yeah.
stupid argument. And I've spoken to farmers as well who say that program's done more for the farming community than Country File and all those other programs for 25 years. But that's
Amazing.
my belief anyway. So
Yeah.
I see why people are vegan or vegetarian, but there's just so much ultra processed foods and it's not good for you.
Yeah.
Eddie Abu made a big difference as well. He's got now like 4 million followers.
Yeah.
I have been influenced, but ultimately it was Sabat. Sabat's a healthy dog, healthier than I was, and he's eating meat. And I thought, I'll give it a go and see what happens. And what
Amazing.
happened was in the first 3 months was I lost weight and I increased strength. And I thought this is, and significantly as well. That's what surprised me.
Yeah.
From bench pressing, a certain weight to another weight by
Yeah.
about a third in 3 months. It was incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing, isn't it? Like just talking to you today on the podcast about how Sabat has changed your life in so many different ways, and or
Mm-hmm.
like you say, unexpectedly, because it was you was thrust upon this situation in sad circumstances. But looking back now, just how by having him in your life, he's changed so many different aspects of your life as well. So if anybody's listening to the podcast who is new to the dog world and possibly being a little bit overwhelmed about it, or whether they've just inherited a pet in similar circumstances, or whether they've just got a dog and they didn't really know what they were getting involved in, what kind of advice would you give somebody who's feeling overwhelmed that may be new to all of this?
On YouTube.
You
just just learn as much as you can. Talk
yeah,
to other dog owners. I mean, I have found the dog community is a really nice community. I've
yeah,
also found there's some proper arseholes out there as well.
exactly.
But
Yeah,
I've learned so much about humans by watching their behaviour with dogs. We went we went to the light switch on in a local town last week. It's a town that I know ever so well.
yeah,
And we were walking around. There's lots of noise. Sabbath's okay with noise. And there were all sorts of dogs there. There was one that was a bit nasty. There always is, isn't there? But there was
yeah.
a Shih Tzu, and I love Shih Tzus as a breed. The bloody thing was in a pram, never got out and walked. So
Bless
Sabat
them.
just kept sticking his nose, and I only got nervous because Sabat was just like, "What are you doing in there, mate?" It's like you've
Yeah,
got legs. We
yeah,
know that Shih Tzus can run, and this thing was just being pushed around. And there's another woman who, when he come near, he picked the dog up. Oh, give the dog. And I know why, because some dogs attack little dogs. I do get it, and he does look like a little wolf, but he's great with little dogs. They don't know that. I do understand that, but
yeah,
most people are lovely. We had one of our dog walkers come to the book launch. I told her the story of what we were doing. She came to the book launch and supported us. Told other people about it, even though they didn't come. They knew. When people write, I think that if you know somebody and someone says, "I've written a book," you often think, "I bet it's terrible." I know this book is good.
yeah,
This is my sixth book. I've been doing this for a while. I've read lots of books. I poured my heart and soul into it, and because I wanted people to have the help that I couldn't find at the time. So
yeah,
to answer your question about what, I mean, that's why it's called dog walking for beginners. You know,
yeah,
if you wear this hoodie, and I've got the dog walking for beginners logo on there, and it has on the back, people
yeah,
think you're a dog walker, and then you go,
yeah,
"No, it's a book." And I go, "Huh?" Because on the back, it's got my thing. It's got everything you need is at the end of the lead.
yeah,
So when that came to me, I was like, "Is that true?" And I thought, well, dogs give you protection, they give you love, they give you comfort, they make you laugh. Do you know what? I think that is true. I'm having that. Right, everything you need is at the end of a lead. That makes sense to me. That does. Um,
yeah,
and I just think if you've got love to give, they will help you massively on the journey anyway,
yeah,
because they will give you that love back. They reciprocate it very, very well. More so
yeah,
than children, to be honest. They're easier to look after than children. I've got three kids, two stepsons, and it's my own son.
yeah,
The process with him was much easier than it was with the children.
yeah, definitely.
I have to worry about him going out late at night and who he's bringing home and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
It's just an easy life, really.
Yeah,
It's a
amazing.
fascinating
So,
thing. So yeah, YouTube is great because YouTube knows the answers to everything. But then you
yeah,
get conflicting advice as well, and so that's
yeah,
difficult. And there
yeah.
are people who are used to your podcast who are listening to me. Some of your people go, "That bloke has no clue what he's talking about." That's fine. I'm never going to say I'm David Attenborough. I'm just going through my 4 years of experience of being a sole dog owner.
Yeah, exactly.
He's healthy. We have a good life.
Yeah.
In the local area, he's becoming more famous than Lassie. It's all that sort of.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's it, and I think that's important to all the range of listeners are going to be at completely different stages. So there'll probably be people listening that are just new dog owners themselves, that just want, that maybe have resonated with this podcast in some way, and just, well, something's tweaked their interest, and that I'm listening into this. So I dare say it will help numerous amounts of people. And I think that's the thing. I think it doesn't matter where you are on your journey, whether you're a new dog owner or whether you've been in this business over 10 years like I have, there is always more to learn from the right sources. And I think that's it. As long as you're open to learning, every day is a school day, so to speak, don't they? So to kind of wrap this up, what would you say is the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself through your relationship with Sabat?
What a good question. What's the most surprising thing? I think the most surprising thing is that I can do it, because it changed my life 100%. I've lived on my own quite a lot over the last 10 years. I've had relationships where we've lived together for quite a lot. I've been married, but I've spent a lot of time on my own, and that's fine. I've got 2,000 books around me. I've got something to read every now and then. and I have the things that I like to do, and I've stuck in my ways in that way, and watch old TV shows and all that sort of stuff. But you then have to plan your life in so many ways. So if I want to go out for the day, it's going to take more than 6 hours. I won't leave him on his own. Find someone to look after him. 6 hours even is pushing it. But he can go to Kirsty's parents, and they love him and look after him, and or Simon will look after him. And I've got really good people. I've got other people who look after him. Because Sabat's a friendly dog, so they want to look after him. He's not going to come in and eat your furniture. He's not one of those dogs. So that's nice, that people care for Sabat as well. In my little world, a lot of people know me, so that they do that as well. So the surprising thing is the amount of planning you have to do to look after the dog correctly. So that's probably the thing that surprised me, and the fact that you just get on with it every day. Whether you're in the depths of grief or whether you're having the happiest time of your life, the care for the dog is always there. And I know people whose dogs have passed, and then they've said, well, I'm giving myself a break from dogs at the moment, because it's quite nice not to have. It's like looking after an elderly parent, isn't it? Feel guilty as hell when they do pass, but the relief that's gone. But then you don't get all the fun either, do you?
Exactly.
Every day I've got to go out a minimum of twice a day, rain or shine, and walk in. That's the job. That's the job. I I know the weather forecast so well now. Check it out the night before. Do we run? Do we walk at 7, or do we wait till later in the day? I won't go out if it's pouring with rain. I don't think. I know lots of people do, but I've just got to dry him. It's a pain in the ass. Why would I want to do that? But if it's drizzly, we'll go out. If it's pouring rain, I'll tell him we have to go out later, and we'll go for a longer day tomorrow. Yesterday it was sunny. We're in the car a lot, so we've done a good long walk this morning. We'll do a long walk tonight.
Amazing.
It's the discipline of looking up, and I am a disciplined person. I would say that. I've got all those disciplines within me, and I like the fact that about 6-7 years ago I had a DVT, and it's this sitting down bit of the job. So even though I was quite healthy, I was really surprised I had a DVT. I didn't want that to come back again. That went after 3 months. Can't get one now. It's almost impossible because you're out walking all the time. You're out there, and walking's great exercise, whereas running can be tiring on the body. Walking is perfect for
the body. Amazing.
A health professional said to me recently, "Do you walk?" I said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "I've got a dog." "Is it brisk walking?" I said, "You don't own a dog, do you?" It is for about 6 steps, and then it's not.
Oh, I see. And it's amazing to hear as well, and just through listening to your story today, is so nice how dogs can change our lives in many ways. And, you know, he's helped with your mental health, your physical health, and, you know, there's the companionship and absolutely everything that encompasses that as well, getting out and communicating with people because, you know, they're a talking point and everything. So it's been lovely to chat with you. And I'm sure some of our listeners have resonated with things and you've said things that they're now going to go away and think about or even start planning, which is, you know, which we want people to do as well. So they're not leaving any unexpected things to family as well. So to finish off with, like we do on the podcast, we always do a quick fire round of 5 questions where we get to know you a little bit deeper, basically. So they're really, really simple. We'll kick off with the first one, which is tea or coffee.
Neither. I don't do caffeine.
Amazing.
This is hot chocolate in there.
Amazing. So right, if you had to pick one, what is your favorite dog breed?
Oh, Sholly. It's amazing.
That's it. What is this one? Might be a little bit harder. What is your go-to dog product that you use or recommend all the time?
Contentious raw food.
Yeah. Amazing.
I spoke to a vet the other day and she said that can only work. She said you have to be careful with that one. I went, well, Sabat's thriving on it. So yeah, I found raw is what works for me.
Amazing. So lead walk or off lead adventure?
Oh, off lead adventure, preferably.
Amazing. And then the last one, what's your favorite way to recharge after a busy day?
I either read or I'll watch movies.
Amazing. It's interesting actually, because a lot of people that I've had on the podcast, they've had such a contrast of what they do. They'll say something like, I don't know, cross stitch or horror movies, which is just 2 completely different ends of the scale. So fantastic. So if our listeners are listening and wanting to get hold of your book, where can they find information and where can they buy it, basically?
Yeah, they can contact me through dogwalkingandy@gmail.com and I'll send them a signed copy. They're £12, including post and package. So £11.99, whatever you want to call it. So you can just email and I'll send the details. Or if they just want to get it on Amazon, it's on Kindle on Amazon, or you can buy the paperback copy as well. It's called Dog Walking for Beginners. It's green. It looks like that. If you want hoodies, we do hoodies and t-shirts because I want this to be a movement. I genuinely do. I want this to be more than a book. I'm so proud of him and enamored with what he's done for me, that what it can do for people in grief as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't have to have grief to have a dog, but they just help you in so many ways. And to come from not knowing anything to learning this stuff, I would still say I'm a beginner compared to, I'm 4 years in. I still don't know lots of things, but I know how to love him and he knows how to love me. And I know what he likes. I know how much he loves his walks and his routines. And we laugh a lot together. He makes me laugh. He's bonkers. I mean, one of the toys that I should have brought you, years ago, I used to use hand puppets for therapy. And one of them looks like a hyena. And he thinks it's a dog every put it up on my hand. It's the maddest thing that we do in the house. But he just, practices stuff and he'll nip me every now and then. And it just makes me laugh. So that's what
that's been brilliant. It's been lovely to chat to you, and I think that's it for the chat. Is everything that we talk about on the podcast anyway, and everything I believe in about how the more we understand our dogs, they help us understand ourselves, and then it is just about spreading awareness of. That's why I have the podcast, to speak to loads of different people, loads of different experiences, because the more we speak about things, the more that people can resonate with them. And often what we speak about on the podcast is things that don't get spoken about, as freely as everything else. And I think sometimes a lot of people can suffer in silence or feel like they're the only ones that are going through something. So by sharing your story today, you've helped lots of listeners, I'm presuming, to understand and know that they're not alone and that they have got somewhere to go as well. So hopefully they will come on and buy the book, and hopefully that awareness will spread a little bit further as well. So thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. It's been lovely chatting to you. So if you are new to the podcast, make sure that you like the episode. Make sure you follow and subscribe so you don't miss a future episode again. So thank you very much, Andy, for coming on, and we shall see you all in the next episode.
Thanks ever so much. Thank you.
See you.